Hello, today we're going to be talking about the concept of erosion. We'll talk about what it is, as well as how it happens, the different types, and the different results that can occur from erosion. Let's start by talking about what erosion is. Erosion is when wind, water, ice, or gravity can transport small pieces of rocks like soil, gravel, and sediment from one location to another. It's basically the movement of rocks. Here's a picture of Bryce Canyon. It's one of the most beautiful landforms in the United States that was formed naturally by the process of erosion. And we're going to talk about more in detail how this is possible. Now, there's a word, deposition, that's very much related to the word erosion. So deposition is the process when rocks or sediment is laid down or dropped into a new location because of erosion. So erosion is when the rocks are moving. Deposition is when rocks are deposited or settled into a new spot. This word weathering is also related to the word erosion and deposition. We're going to spend another lesson on weathering separately, but basically to just sum it up, weathering is when the rocks are actually broken down, erosion is when the rocks move, and deposition is when the rocks get settled into a new location. So we're going to be talking about erosion and deposition today, and there's different types. So the reason why we study erosion and deposition is, one, it's a big part of the rock cycle. So we learned that in the last lesson that rocks get recycled to form new landforms on Earth. And you can see right here, weathering and erosion is one part of the rock cycle, and it's very key to forming sedimentary rock. It also can, affect us because it can change the way we live, our habitats. Like this is a landslide that happened. It can affect other living things, such as changing the habitat in which certain organisms survive. And it's a natural process. So the first type of erosion we're going to be talking about is wave erosion. So wave erosion occurs at the coastline where ocean water meets landforms, and basically waves will pound against the shoreline, and the energy from the waves will move chunks of rock, sand, and sediment from the land. And waves can form different types of structures depending on the type of rock that it's pounding against. It can form sea arches, like you see here, sea caves, like you see in this picture. Headlands are basically cliffs that form from wave erosion, and wave cut terraces. This is a picture of a wave cut terrace. It's basically an eroded piece of rock, and it's a flat piece of rock formed by waves. So wave deposition is basically when waves will deposit sediment or small pieces of sand onto land to form what we call a beach. So a beach is any area of shoreline that has no small pieces of sediment like sand and rocks that was deposited by waves. So not all beaches have sand. Some beaches have small pebbles, like in this one. This is a beach completely made of small pebbles. Others are made from eroded lava from nearby volcanoes, such as in this picture. You can see the type of rocks that are deposited are eroded igneous rock. Now let's talk about another type of erosion called wind erosion. So basically, wind erosion happens when the wind will pick up really fine and small rock particles like you see in this picture, and they can blow them and move them to new locations. Sometimes the wind can blast the particles against larger rocks like this one, and basically that action of the wind blasting the small particles of rock on larger pieces of rock can cut this rock and shape them into new formations. Like this picture shows, a rock formation in Arizona that was completely formed by the process of the wind kind of scraping small pieces of sand against this larger piece, and it forms these beautiful rock formations. Now let's talk about wind deposition. So wind deposition works when the winds will eventually slow down, and when they do slow down, it will drop those small rock particles into a new location. And the heavier particles, because they're heavy, they get dropped first. And when wind deposition happens, it can form what we call sand dunes, and they're basically mounds of sand that were deposited by wind. And we typically see sand dunes, in the desert or where there's lots of sand, but it can also occur, nearby other locations. Like this is not in a desert. Now let's talk about ice erosion. So ice erosion is when big glaciers or a huge mass of moving ice that was formed by layers of snow that was built up year after year, they will move and carry rocks with them. So glaciers typically move because of gravity. And when they move, sometimes they will pick up small pieces of rock, around. And this is a picture of a glacial retreat. And basically this area is where the glacier moved, and when it moves through different landforms, it can cut through certain landforms and create new landforms around it, and sometimes will carry small pieces of rock with it, and that's ice erosion. Ice deposition happens when those glaciers eventually will melt off, and when it melts, it sometimes will drop off some of the rocks that it carried, and it could also leave behind new landforms. And over time, that can provide a new habitat for different organisms. Like in this picture, this area was created by a glacier, and over many years, this is now inhabited by new organisms. Now let's talk about stream and river erosion. So the movement of water can carry sediment from one location to another and also create new landforms. So river and stream erosion can occur, and it's determined by two different factors. The first factor is gradient. So basically what that means is how high a river is, starting from the elevation of a river. The higher the gradient, the faster the river will flow and the faster the erosion will happen, because faster moving water will carry rocks and sediment with it faster. The other factor that can affect river erosion is discharge. So basically, discharge is the volume or the amount of water that the river carries in a certain period of time. The larger the discharge, the more erosion can occur. So this, think about when it rains. When it rains, the amount of water in a river goes up, and so the river will tend to flow faster, and that will cause more erosion, because the more water there is, the more sediment gets carried. So these two pictures kind of show what I'm talking about. This river has a very low gradient and a very, very calm water, not very many discharge. So this river is flowing very slowly, and the erosion here in this area is happening, but it's happening very slowly. Whereas in this picture, there's a lot of discharge and higher gradient, so the water is flowing more quickly, and so the erosion around this area is happening more quickly. A good example of a structure that was made by river erosion is the Grand Canyon. This is a picture of the Grand Canyon. You can see the Colorado River in this area. And over millions of years, this river has cut through these layers of sedimentary rock and formed this beautiful land formation. Now let's talk about deposition from streams and rivers. So the erosion can happen, and with that erosion happening, there's actually sediment that gets dumped after the erosion happens, and we call that deposition. So when the speed of water eventually slows down, at the end of that, we deposit all this sediment, and there's three different types of stream and river deposition that I want to talk about. The first one is a delta. This is basically where a river will dump mud into a larger body of water like an ocean or lake. So this is a picture of a delta right here, and you can see all the mud and sediment that was carried by river erosion gets dumped in this area. And deltas can form new lands, where it dumps the mud, and it can cause the coastlines to grow larger. Alluvial fans happen usually at the bottom of a mountain where a mountain stream will dump its sediment. So there's a stream at the top of the mountain, and at the end of the stream, it will dump all the sediment that was happening from river erosion at the bottom. So this is a picture of alluvial fans. And the last type is a floodplain, and basically this happens in the middle of a river, and it's when the river erosion is happening, and it will, along the river, it will dump sediment around the area where it's flowing, and it creates what we call a floodplain. And here's a floodplain right here, and it could be good for farming because it brings new soil to this area, and it can be used to grow crops. We're going to talk about the last type of erosion, which is called mass movement. And basically what it is, it's when a large amount of material, like rock or soil or snow, will move down a slope by the force of gravity. So here are some examples. There's 4 types of mass movement I want to highlight. The first type is a rock fall. Basically, it's when large rocks or loose rocks along a mountain will fall. So here's a picture of a rock fall. Another type of mass movement erosion is landslides. And landslides occur usually from, after heavy rains, or earthquakes, or construction on unstable slopes, or deforestation even can trigger landslides. It's the sudden movement of land and down a slope. Mud flows are also similar to landslides, except it usually occurs primarily after heavy rain, and it's when a large amount of mud flows down a slope, and it usually is because there's not enough forestry or not enough plants holding down the mud, so when it rains, it will slide down the slope, causing this to happen. And this is a picture of the aftermath of a mud flow. And the last type of mass movement is creep. And basically, that's the really slow movement of rocks and soil downhill, and it's naturally caused by when dirt gets loosened from plants and burrowing animals, like when animals burrow through slopes and cause, the movement of soil, it causes that soil to slowly move down the hill, and that's called creep. So deposition of mass movement works when the force of gravity will drop and dump that large mass of rocks and soil and sediment at the bottom at a new location. So the deposition can cause a lot of destruction to man-made structures, like in this picture. The landslide caused a lot of destruction to the city that was formed at the bottom of the mountain. But at the same time, this is a natural process, so these things have occurred for millions of years and have happened all the time. And this can actually cause new habitats to form and new landforms to form for other organisms. So those are the results of deposition of mass movement.